Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Tonight, got a late night insight or a quick hit video on a Frederic Malle. And this is Frederic Malle L'Eau d'Hiver. Now, I will tell you, when I received this decant from one of you, thank you very much, by the way. You know who you are. I'm very grateful. I did not even know that L'Eau d'Hiver was an inspiration, a stroke of inspiration by Jean-Claude Ellena, if you will, back in 2003, and he was inspired by something. And what he was inspired by is a very old perfume from the year 1906, and it's called Après L'Onde by Guerlain, one of the greats, one of the all-time greats. I actually just did a video on it within the last week or week and a half. It's in my Guerlain playlist. You can check out the video on Après L'Onde. I was a little poetic in that review, mostly because it was the only way I knew how to describe something so beautiful and, so, it was almost like peering into the past, wearing that perfume and getting a better understanding on the history of Guerlain and the Guerlainade and the Guerlain house, and even a better understanding on that almond note that Thierry Vasser used so prominently in many of his creations, like, for example, Tonka Imperial, which has really grown on me, by the way. When I first wore it, I hated it. I almost sold it, actually. I almost sold it to Rich Mitch. And then I decided, you know what? I better not give up on a fragrance after one wear. That's not like me, and I'm glad I didn't, because it's really opened up once I got some more air in the bottle. And of course, the almond note is the most popular or most prominent note, the thread that ties the L'Homme Ideal line together. So the reason I bring that up is this fragrance, L'Eau d'Hiver for Frederic Malle back in 2003, is a fragrance that ended up, the way that Jean-Claude Ellena reported it, is that the analysis and conceptual redesign of Après L'Onde is what inspired him. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to redesign Après L'Onde. And he did that in composing L'Eau d'Hiver. And so he adopted this interplay between anisic, aldehydic, almond, and vanilla-like smelling heliotropin and orris, which he transferred to present age by adding transparency and airiness, okay? And Jean-Claude Ellena has a very specific style. And when I first really started to get into vintages and older fragrances and learned about perfumers and all this stuff, and I started to track down perfumes based on perfumers, Jean-Claude Ellena was a perfumer that I really did not like at first. I was not a fan. In fact, I thought he was really a minimalist, and I thought he was, and I thought that was a bad thing back then. Now, when I say he's a minimalist, it doesn't come across as a bad thing to my brain and to my nose. But back then, whenever I heard the word minimalist, or, it was like a negative, like I thought he was just being cheap. He wasn't using many ingredients. He was being lazy, and that's furthest from the truth. Actually, there's so much to discover in a Jean-Claude Ellena creation, but you have to spend time with it, and you have to be very perceptive, and you have to pay attention to the fragrance, because sometimes the changes and the nuances are very subtle, okay? So, Après L'Onde and L'Eau d'Hiver are forever linked. And when I got this decant, I didn't even know that. All I knew was this was another Frederic Malle I hadn't smelled. And there's so much out there. And the other side of the coin is, there's so many Frederic Malles I still haven't smelled. And so this was just another one in the bucket I hadn't smelled. And then once I learned the link, I was very interested. But I couldn't smell this until I understood Après L'Onde better. And I even though a little decant isn't enough to understand one of the most iconic perfumes, I think if you made someone who was really knowledgeable and in the know list their 10 or 20 most important fragrances of all time ever, Guerlain's would litter the list, but Après L'Onde would be one of those Guerlains. Even though it's not my favorite style of fragrance, it's a fragrance I really respect and honor. And, just the fact that it inspired Jean-Claude Ellena to create this perfume says it all. And if you want to learn more about that, I did the best I could on my Après Londe early impression. Go check that out. So we're 5 minutes in. I've waffled on. I feel like we need to discuss L'Eau d'Hiver. Now, I've done multiple sprays, okay? So about an hour and a half ago, I have spray on my left hand, and about 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, I did a fresh spray on my right wrist, okay? And I will tell you that this fragrance is listed as a powdery floral fragrance, but it's not super powdery. It is floral, but not in the traditional floral sense like you're thinking. If you've never smelled this before, this is basically the way that I would describe it. It has this slight lotion-like vibe when you first apply. And actually, I thought the lotion-like vibe goes away, but then it comes back, okay? It kind of like the lotion vibe comes and goes. And it opens up very creamy, and it has this slight earthiness to the fragrance, okay? So not very earthy, but slight earthiness. And it's also a little bit aromatic, okay? So there's a lot of little things going on, and imagine Jean-Claude Elena's watercolor-like style, okay? So everything is a little bit light and transparent. However, it's not as light and transparent as Après Londe, I will tell you that. At least the current version. See, what was sent to me was a sample by Rachel. Thank you, Rachel, by the way. And she sent me this current EDT, I believe it was, of Après Londe, and it was extremely light, which is fine. I think that's how the fragrance is supposed to be. It's supposed to be literally, you know, the growth and rebirth after the rain. It's supposed to have this wet, dewy, heliotrope and iris and almond accord, that anisic almond aldehyde thing that they used in Après Londe. And so this is a little heavier from the beginning. It has some strange notes listed on Parfumo, which I don't know if they're guesses or if they're legitimate notes, because they do have a couple notes listed. Like, for example, there's a caramel note listed. I can't say I get any caramel. I can't think that in an iconic fragrance representing Après Londe, Jean-Claude Elena would use caramel. That doesn't sound right to me. But imagine you have this lotiony, creamy vibe, okay, with slight earthiness. The earthiness comes from a couple places at once, okay? It comes from Angelica, which Angelica is a note that literally every single fragrance I've ever smelled, ever, that has Angelica in it, I like. Some of them I love, like Royal Oud is a fantastic use of Angelica, and Cedar, of course. But Angelica is one of those fragrances, you know, and or one of those notes, and I've noticed that a couple times. There are some notes in perfumery where when you see it, you know you're going to love it. Jonathan mentioned it in our live stream a week ago, where he was like, I love rhubarb. Anything that I see rhubarb in, I know I'm going to love it. And that's how I am with Angelica. It's also in that D-squared potion, which I have a full bottle somewhere up there that Anique Menardo did. Discontinued, but fantastic if you ever find it at a good price. D-squared potion is amazing. So rooty earthiness kind of comes from this Angelica and from Iris. The Iris here is absolutely beautiful, stunning, perfect execution of Iris. I mean, you know, the Iris is executed to perfection. And again, this is an early impression, so this is the first time I'm smelling it. But it's not a very first impression where I spray and smell. I've had this on my skin now for an hour and a half, and so I'm kind of starting to understand the development. But I'm still coming at this fragrance from an extreme novice standpoint. But since I don't own a bottle, and I probably won't own a bottle, I just wanted to do these videos to kind of put my thoughts out there, okay, and give you guys at least a little sample of what I think, a little library of as many scents as I can. And so you have this muskiness, but more so the word that came to mind when I was smelling this is murkiness. Murkiness is the way I would describe L'Eau d'Hiver. It has this murky quality to it, and it's almost like you're smelling or maybe observing. Maybe smelling is a bad word. Maybe observing is the way that I would want to describe it. You're observing a glass of water that you scooped out of the local pond, okay? And you know how sometimes if some dirt from the bottom of the pond, or even if you get water from a local pond, you may also notice some microscopic creatures swimming in there, right? That's the murky vibe that comes to mind when I think of l'eau d'hiver. And then my brain kind of just went tangent, right? And sometimes my brain will do this randomly when I'm smelling fragrances, and it did it with l'eau d'hiver. And the tangent was my brain kind of shifted and started thinking murkiness, microscopic organisms, single cell organisms, and I started thinking single cell and simple life organisms. Of course, that's what comes after the rains. What gives life to all of these beings that are around us, all of these forms of life that also live on Earth, not called humans, right? Many depend on a seasonal aspect. The rains come, the tadpoles are born, they turn into frogs, more tadpoles are born the next year, right? They're dependent on the rain from the heavens, right? And the cycle of life. And I started thinking that it's very interesting that that thought popped into my head subconsciously, because Après Landais is all about kind of the growth of a beautiful violet flower after the rain, right? A very delicate violet flower with that heliotrope note. And I talked a little bit about how the heliotrope connection links to L'Eau Bleu, and there were a couple other people that mentioned other connections to other guirlands as well. There was a note in Après Landais that is only found in one other guirland. It's the guirland that Russian Adam was telling me about on the last stream him and I did. Something Defounds. It's a very rare, extremely rare guirland from like the 1910s or 20s, and it's a suede fragrance, like a leathery suede. And it's very, very expensive to buy right now. So there's these little strange connections with guirland, right? And the other notes that you begin to really, or I begin to, these are to my nose on my skin. And again, I'm a really rookie with this fragrance, so if I'm talking nonsense here, I apologize. Sometimes it's hard to talk about these extremely complex fragrances with the blink of an eye, with a quick decision on what it smells like and what it makes you feel. But there's a hawthorn note that's used in here, and that hawthorn note also jumped out to me. So the angelica jumped out to me, the hawthorn jumped out to me, the heliotrope and iris jumped out to me because of the connection to, of course, Après Landais. The angelica just jumped out to me personally because I love angelica, but the hawthorn is that white flower that I'm always reminded of a couple fragrances when I think about hawthorn, but really there's one master hawthorn fragrance in my mind, one of the best hawthorn notes I've ever smelled. Well, of course, we mentioned the guirland Après Landais. That has to be one. But the other one is also a Jean-Claude Elena, and it is called Cuir d'Ange. And I love this stuff. This is one of like the sleeper leathers for me, because if I wanted to wear like a leather during the summertime or during the warmer weather, this is the kind of stuff I like to reach for. It's not as heavy or aggressive as many of the type of leathers that I know and love are. It's not like Bel Ami, or it's not like some of the other leathers that I've talked about over the years. It has this almost white or beige. I think about a pristine, freshly bought Hermes white leather bag, right? It hasn't gotten dirty yet from the woman carrying it on her arm, and it's perfectly pristine. It's white or it's beige. The color of the juice is actually a perfect representation of maybe what the leather color would look like, beige or white, right? That's the way that hawthorn feels, and it's here. Jean-Claude Elena mastered that hawthorn note, and he revisited again in Queer d'Ange, which I think came well after L'Eau d'Hiver. Yeah, Queer d'Ange came in 2014. I love Queer d'Ange. I'm so glad I have a bottle of that. You know, there's also a hawthorn note in Fahrenheit, believe it or not. But it's not too powdery, and yet, even though it's not too powdery, there is something that is a little more present about this fragrance. And, you know, I was thinking, if you wanted to describe the way the fragrance feels in just a brief synopsis, okay? Murky, green, so green from the Angelica and the rootiness, slight rootiness. Murky, musky. So imagine there is such a thing as green musk. There's not, but imagine there was a green musk. This would be a green musk perfume, right? That's the way that I would describe it. Green musk with that après londe heliotrope that I always think about, either like a dentist making like a, God, it's 11:30 at night. I can't think. Like an imprint of your tooth, right? With that putty, how it just molds, right? That's the way that heliotrope. That's the texture, or like a mattress where you jump on, or you push it together and it bounces back. Memory foam, right? That's the texture of heliotrope, and it's here with that iris, and there is jasmine, but it's kind of a little restrained. Okay, there is carnation, but it's a little restrained. This is Jean-Claude Elena we're talking about. Even that honey note that's listed, normally I would go, wow, honey is absolutely one of my favorite notes, and it is here, but like a ghost honey. Like a honey jar that was from 1906 when Après Londe came out, and maybe the honey has been completely out of the jar for decades and decades, and yet if you put your nose to that jar, you still get a slight ghost smell of the honey from decades ago. The jar has just been sitting in your grandma's cabinet, for forever, and she never touches it, and it's just been there. That's the honey vibe. It's very very restrained, and yet this is beautiful. It's absolutely stunning. The creation as a whole feels much more polished and complete than the little individual pieces I'm reading. Bergamot, Angelica, Hawthorn, Heliotrope, Honey, Iris, Jasmine, Caramel, which I don't get any caramel, Musk, and Carnation come together to make me say pass. Like if I just read that note listing, I would go pass. Not for me. But especially when I would read it's a powdery floral, pass. But there is something about the magic of the way that it all comes together, and the connection to, a Hall of Fame fragrance that all frag heads should smell. Every single frag head, even if you hate heliotrope and iris and violet and, all the stuff in Après Londe, you should smell it, because it is a Hall of Fame fragrance. It's a reference. It's one of the most important fragrances in the timeline of the creation of the beginning of modern fragrances from Jiki on, right? And I have to tip my cap to Jean-Claude Elena. Every time I smell something else of his, every single time, whether it's old or new, whether it's, and I mean not old or new to the creation, but old or new to my nose. I mean, whether I'm smelling something from 2003 or from last year, or, I know he's kind of semi-retired, but it's his style is, I've never had a perfumer go from off-putting to me, almost like a letdown, to something that I absolutely love. I mentioned one of his creations today in my 2019 video that I did, and that was Rose and Queer. And what a fragrance that is, man. And so he's worked with Frederic Malle many a times. They have a fantastic connection together. And maybe even Jean-Claude Elena retiring or stepping away for a bit. Um, maybe it has, maybe it's affected Frederic Malle. Who knows? But because his new stuff just hasn't been the same. Synthetic Jungle and, um, Uncut Gem. And I do have a sample of Synthetic Jungle, so I will do an early impression soon. But I still have yet to smell Uncut Gem. But obviously, I hear terrible things about it. Um, so, yes, I mean, this is one of those fragrances that, like I said, when I first got it, I didn't even know it was a homage to the great Après Landais. So, as a frag head, I have to say thank you, Jean-Claude Elena, for putting this out. Thank you to the secret perfume, the secret perfume fairy who sent this to me. I really do appreciate it. You know who you are. And thanks to everyone for watching. If you have experience with Après Landais or L'Eau d'Hiver, I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear if you think I'm close, if I'm, far away, or if I'm in another planet. But that's kind of what I get. And it is very pleasant. And you know what? If money was no issue, I would buy every single Frederic Malle. I'd have every single bottle of them because they are, they used to be up until the recent releases. They used to really care about the art of perfumery, and to put something like this out, I mean, you could imagine L'Eau d'Hiver not selling well to the general public. You know what I mean? Like maybe um, some of the women who wanted a powdery floral may buy it. They may not understand the connection to Après Landais, or most of them may not. The real frag heads obviously will. But to keep something like this going, not discontinuing it, it says a lot about the brand. And even though Frederic Malle had some bumps along the way, I'm not completely down and out on them yet. I'm still interested to see what he has up his sleeve. And I do think that Estee Lauder gives him the, freedom to kind of put out what he wants. I don't think they're really pressuring him. Doesn't feel like they are anyways. But yes, that's my take. Do let me know what you guys think in the comments. I love reading your comments. I love interacting with you guys. And so another one in the books. Thanks for watching, everybody. Cheers, guys. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.